think it could be interesting. So I guess the convenient factor of it just being the two of us is there's minimal introduction round required. If I can get the cat out of the way. Hold on. But let's see. Yeah. So, is there anything you want to bring in before we sort of kick off? Just to help ground you into the space.
No, not really at this point. So I just hopped in. Not too much upfront looking into this. So kind of, yeah, we'll take your lead. Let you take the lead on this one.
Okay. Well, then let me perhaps offer you some context, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in contrasting it with the dojo, right, which is a real like sort of liminal, almost reflective, transformational space. This design call is that my intention, at least, is a much more practical space, right? Really trying to get to work and come up with solutions for, problems that are or challenges or situations that are actual, right? And that, I think, Wise Crowds is a good structure to help us, look recursively into a design challenge for a workshop. Yep. So between Wise Crowds, really, and a design storyboard, right? If we can sort of marry these two structures together, then I think we should have like an opportunity to say, hey, this is something I'd like help planning, and to leverage whoever shows up to help us get into it.
Yep.
David Furlow. Ah, cool.
Ooh.
So let's help Dave get grounded in. Yo, David. Yo.
How you guys doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Yeah, we're recording the session, if that's all right with you. I'm not sure what it'll be, but I'm super interested to record like a practical planning session. So see what value there might be in it for folks, or not. I mean, let's see. I was just telling Robert that sort of in contrast to some other spaces that we host, the intention is to be a very practical space. And David, I know both you and Robert, but I don't imagine you guys know each other.
I've certainly seen you a few times, Robert, but I don't think I've ever met you or talked to you. So.
No, I don't think so either. I've seen you around on several meetups. So yeah. Well, I'm Robert. I'm Dutch. Scrum Master at company. Yeah, met Jeremy in doing some what's it called again? Manifesto for slow thinking. So I met up with Jeremy there. Been doing some stuff ever since with him. So
yeah, I've been using the manifesto for slow thinking to get people to think. It's been useful. It's been useful. I think people want to agree with those principles, and they're kind of in a bad habit, like a bad rut of immediacy. And I attribute a lot of it to mobile telephones, because anytime that you can tap a button and get immediate feedback, it's very tempting. It's like a drug for dopamine.
Yeah, no, it's indeed something we saw indeed in our early sessions on the manifesto. That people, they all appreciated it, and actually when they experienced it as well, it was really they really liked it. But they were also in my normal work, I need to kind of fall back to old patterns fairly quickly. it's interesting space though. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm working with an international education charity, and my day job is strategy and analytics. So I mostly work with data systems, and then I'm data engagement, I would say. So it's like trying to get people to use evidence in their thinking, and not to just say, as you know, really good teachers sometimes have the right to say, you just know when you're doing it right. But you know, you can always give them examples where what happens when two people don't agree or the wise person leaves. You know, and if the evidence speeds up your intuition and your insight, then isn't that a good thing?
Yep.
So that's kind of like a, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 year project that I've been working on. And then I've been, for the last 2 years, really exploring the community of people that are doing liberating structures and agile thinking, agenda shift. I think, you know, we've been around the rounds of different intellectually interesting movements or practices. So I've been studying those things. And are you both in the Netherlands then?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and I'm just across the channel. So I've been living here for 30 years in England, but I was born in Germany and raised in New Orleans. So I've kind of been around the U.S. I've worked in Asia for a couple of years. I was traveling. I worked for Philips Electronics, so I was working with them in the mid '80s, and Sun Microsystems. So you know, I was at the dawn of microcomputers, just getting into it from the perspective of a literature and history student, not a computer scientist. So all the methodological things to me are really interesting, since technology is now so democratized that almost anybody can program a computer, you know. So we're moving into the next era of what kind of power will the devices have and what will they give. So really the thing that we couldn't imagine. I was working with Philips on CDI and CD-ROM. So we were like, you know, physical media, because you need massive storage, and we didn't think that the network was not fast enough to deliver anything.
Yeah, that was at that time indeed. Yeah.
So
That changed a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, and now here we are in the joint point to the fifth joint point in evolution. Well, gentlemen, so I put a link to this doc that I am sort of test driving, just to ensure that there's a shared storyboard. I tend to do a lot of notes on my iPad, which works for me, but I also want to, hopefully whatever this space becomes is more than just my personal, you know, I need help space. And so in order to sort of democratize that, the ability to contribute on that, I want to see if this Google Doc will do the trick for us, or if something else is required. I think so we last time, yes, Isaiah. Uh-oh. Well, Mom will take care of it, I'm sure. Yeah. Yep. Uh-oh. That's no good. Well, whatever can go wrong will. So good to know that Murphy's Law is in effect. So we did this brainstorm last week on the basis of Triz, just trying to say, hey, whatever this sort of practical space is, how do we properly fuck it up and turn it into a total shit show? So one of the points that came up was, there is sort of like this sweet space that we want to find in between sort of Scylla and Charybdis, in between like making it too explicit what any participant's experience level is with liberating structures. Like, we don't want to create a second-class citizenship out of it, but we also don't want to make it totally invisible. So how might we be able to use some basic guidance of, hey, I'm small, medium, large, extra large experience, and help offer folks some functional roles to make that, to sort of push them into a more functional space in that experience level. So I think you guys are both correct me if I'm wrong, but I think how would you, in this growth hierarchy, on the top of that dock, where are you guys sort of falling in experience with structures, with liberating structures, I suppose, in particular?
Ooh.
I think I'm in the rapturous, in between rapturous and maestro minimalist. I'm practicing and experiencing, but my balance is more experiencing than facilitating.
Okay.
Getting to know the structures, but not necessarily leading them.
Oh, all right. That's interesting.
But my goal has been to be a super participant, like to use it, you know, to make it,
All right.
and work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I probably put myself there as well, looking at it. I've done a fair share of these liberating structures, but not all, and sometimes I'm actually also still somewhat new to a certain structure, but I usually can apply it pretty well. Designing stuff, yeah, it's sometimes hit and miss. I probably would say similar.
I design lots of them, but that doesn't mean that in my organization or in my team or in some of my project groups, because I'm definitely in a matrix environment, you know, I can't always get people to do a whole string. I can get them to do 40 minutes of one structure. Sometimes I'll be able to do some punctuation and then a structure and then some more punctuation. Occasionally I've had asynchronous luck, like getting people to do stuff outside of a meeting time. But
yeah,
well, I think it's nice to have that sort of, those groups that you have there, because it just kind of, any kind of micro credentialing idea or micro competency is help, you know, to let you know where the steps on the ladder are. Even if the ladder goes up and then down and then around, it's not really hierarchical. It's just more like comfort and familiarity. And I guess it's like being Mr. Fix-It too. Like in a given situation, what can you do?
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, I recognize that. I mean, there's always a risk, and I think Barry and Christian talk about that as well, using liberating structures for the sake of using liberating structures, which probably is not the right way to treat it. It's, you want to achieve something and then see how a liberating structure could fit that, and look at it from that perspective. And yeah, you need to be aware of that, because otherwise you're throwing 1, 2, 4s and conversation cafes all over the place where they might not be useful and or necessary. So yeah, it's something to consider. But yeah, when you can attach them to a certain outcome, they're usually pretty good. Works well.
Word. I definitely relate to that strong necessity of like tying them into. It's funny, right? So on one hand, I agree wholeheartedly that they are really great means toward ends, right? So whatever my purpose or my underlying goal is, they're good tools to help me accomplish that goal from a communication standpoint. And what I also notice is that for my own sake of growth, I definitely consider myself a minimalist. Is that I'm also very much leaning into a space that is actually liberating structures for the sake of liberating structures. That is the way in which there's a sort of a particular opportunity space. It's probably better to use a concrete example. So I was planning this this community of practice for the KnotWorking group with Anya last go around, right? And for most events, most workshops, right, I usually think about prep time to delivery time is about 3 to 1, right? But with liberating structures, like I get on this call with Anya, who has a high degree of fluency, and like 30 minutes later, we're done. And it's just like, oh yeah, this is the best. Like I want to be in this like generative creativity more and more of the time with more and more people. So how do I help increase the fluency of those around me, and also grow the user base so that there are more people to become more fluent with me, so that I can experience this radical vibe. So that's sort of where I'm at, and it has a lot to do with my intention behind this call. I hope to do it in 3 out of 4 weeks at this time box, and just offer a space for people to bring in design challenges, meetings, workshops, just situations at work, and see how we might be able to use bring structures to bear to deal with that type of stuff. And so you'll notice on the doc, I have some basic suggestions, right, for where we're at on this growth hierarchy, and how we might be able to activate particular roles. Like I think, given what came out of the Triz, I really want to encourage people to ask what may seem like stupid and ridiculous questions, just so that we can make sure that we're upskilling everybody as we go and not sort of leaving anybody behind. I can, especially for me, I can be super presumptuous and just assume that everybody knows that everything I know, which I continuously turns out to not be the case. And then of course, I also want to encourage people to, if you have an answer, if you think you know what the answer is to any of those questions, like try and answer the question that you have never answered before, so that we can just ensure that everybody's getting reps in, and like, how do I get this stuff out of my mouth in a way that tracks and is coherent, and so that we can get that practice. And then for people, like me, like I really want to, I will have some challenge in shutting the fuck up, right? And not answering all the questions because I'm super enthusiastic. Another anecdote's good. When I was in 8th grade, I tried to teach my dad algebra. He was going back to school for the first time. And I was geeked out. I'm a math head. So I tried to teach him algebra, but I just blew his face off with all of my enthusiasm and excess information. That just didn't turn out to work at all whatsoever. So how do I shut up enough to give space to other people to explain stuff that they have never explained before, and build on and add on to that input where necessary, rather than the other way around.
Yep.
So
I think there's insight in that, in the asking a question and waiting for the answer. It's like you're shifting the ground in a way that can be genuinely curious and thought-provoking. And I've seen that frequently when we do breakout sessions that are impromptu networking or conversation cafe, that people are following the thread of the conversation quickly, so it becomes efficient. And maybe like the thing about improving and role-playing, liberating structures as one form of structure, I think of that as like a gymnasium. You're working out, your muscles are getting stronger, and you see those general rules of good behavior, things that will keep focused on advancing the situation as opposed to demonstrating prowess, or and then something about that is, I've observed in different groups, the ability to take joy from that discovery of flow it is the magic. It is the thing that people miss in their everyday life when they're struggling for power or jockeying for control.
Word. That's a beautiful summary. Especially that sense of like downright euphoria. It's like, yeah, this is ripping. Like there's just some cool stuff happening.
But just like when you're in a fast boat on fast water, you're mindful of the fact that you're not going to stop to appreciate it too much because the next wave is coming. Like, keep going. You know, it's surfing in real time. This is a good wave. Let's ride this as far as it goes. And
Totally.
then not feeling despair if you wipe out, and not feeling, you know, like, it's wonderful when you can share it with other people. That is really good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So in the aspiration to learn the structures and to practice the design of strings, as you get more fluent, and when you're working with someone like Anya on the thing that you did for the KnotWorking group, it's like, because there's an understanding of the nuance of what can go right and what could go wrong with each of the approaches, then you're capable of playing jazz faster, you know. And when you're teaching, then it's more, when you're in a group with varying levels of experience, it's more like you're playing slowly and you're making sure that everybody understands the idea of harmony or aharmony, or, you know, an aesthetic is emerging as you're working together or as you're playing together.
Mm-hmm.
Word. Most definitely. You know, sticking to the scales, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you said that about your dad and blowing his face off, I have that feeling all the time with data, because I can make beautiful visualizations that have super cool intellectual curiosity flows. And for me, it's so joyful when I can say, look at this group of kids and drill down on this and look at the relationship between how many times their class was disrupted and what their growth was over the period of a year. And I've lost the audience at step 2, you know, which was, is that a bar graph?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you tell the story at the pace that it can be heard? And I think the idea of asking questions that establish where the group is really helpful.
Yeah, those kind of graphs there usually pretty tricky to understand and also interpret, actually, because
So in the document, are you taking notes now?
I'm taking notes on my notepad here.
Oh, okay.
There was another thought that came to mind that while you were talking about it, about the time to prepare. I think the value of experience, of course, and especially fucking it up, so to say, can be very useful also as something to bring in again to these kind of meetings. So kind of the closing the feedback loop, basically. So we prepare the meeting, we help people, but then it's also good, okay, bring it back. Okay, how did it go? Did it live up to your expectations? Did you get the outcome that you wanted, or was it a complete mess? And well, that's something we can learn from as well, right? So take that that experience back into these discussions.
For sure, field stories I think can be very powerful.
Yeah,
and especially closing the loop on, you know, our best intentions of, you know, what we thought we're going to be, what we thought we were going to make possible, and where we thought we needed to go, and then the realization that sort of emerges while we're on that path of like, oh, it turns out that was the wrong exit entirely. Like we're not going to Florida. It turns out we're actually taking a U-turn heading, or you know, we're actually going to bust left to Georgia. We discovered on the way there.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Or you made certain assumptions up front about the group or the people in the group that turned out to be wrong.
Well, I find that a lot with the groups that I work with that are upper management. They don't want to have a meeting where they don't know how it turns out.
Yeah,
that's scary to them, because that assumes they don't have control, and they also have a strong need to be the smartest person in the room. Whereas when you work with teachers, or even better, students, they just want to know, what are we trying to do? And then let's have fun while we're
Right,
doing it.
let's figure it out. So Caroline has knocked on the door. How do you guys feel about admitting a +1 at this stage in the journey?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Let's get on in. See if we can onboard her into real time. Let's see. Hey, Caroline. I don't know if you can hear us yet.
I can. Hey, sorry I'm late. I just got off to a late start this morning.
No worries. Yeah, it's morning for you, so that makes sense. We're practically evening over here. I just wanted to check in with you and let you know that we're recording this call.
Okay.
So if that's all right, we're going to keep going. I'm not sure what the value or utility of this may be, but I noticed my tendency, my desire to hoard, especially input, is coming into play. So.
Well, I love Wise Crowds. I'm really sorry I was late. Will we get a recording so I'll be able to see the beginning of the session or not? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I can upload
Okay.
it. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
May as well just put it out there and see who can find value in it. So just to sort of bring you up to speed, Caroline, we're thanks for joining. What inspired you to join the space?
Well, I first learned about liberating structures, I think, I don't know how long ago, but it was an Art of Hosting and Participatory Leadership gathering probably 10, 12 years ago. And it was a long time ago. And so I bought the book and, started noodling around the various communities, downloaded the app, all these kinds of things, because I do a lot of facilitation in my professional life, as well as my volunteer life. So I've introduced it in my organization and the work that I do. And we have a break this week for the first time. So I thought, I'll get up and get right into some liberating structures. And then I messed around and I was like, oh my gosh, it started already. So that's why I joined. I lurk around the communities. I participate when I can in the East Coast gatherings because I live about almost equidistant between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. So all of that.
Righteous. Cool. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with us. So we're actually still we're in what I like to call the faffing about stage, right? Just sort of getting warmed up and getting to know each other and helping to sort of put our frame around what this space might become or how we might be able to organize it to help it become what we want it to be. Just to run the risk of repeating myself, but I guess this could be my third explanation for an impromptu networking thing, right? We can look at it that way, that I'm maybe increasing my fluency by repeating myself. So what I hope this space is a very practical space for us to bring our practice of liberating structures to bear in designing solutions to real world situations, and design strings and workshops and meetings so that we can be better prepared actually to introduce structures to the audiences in our local context, especially. And speaking of my local context, you can hear my son singing sweetly here. Yeah. You want to say hello, Isaiah? So that's sort of my intention and goal. I noticed that, I guess I feel like it's a good time to just get into the nuts and bolts of designing something. So
Jeremy, may I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
So who are the other folks on the call?
Righteous.
And who are you?
You want to start, Dave?
Yeah, okay. I work with an international education charity that's based in London, and we also have part of the group is in Doha. And I've been using liberating structures for about, I guess, 2 years. So it started for me right around the time of the pandemic. So it's getting close to a couple of years. And I studied literature and history, but I've been a teacher and I've been a technologist, I've been a programmer. And I was saying to these guys that it's usually the feeling of joy that comes from finding flow together that has made liberating structures good for me. I think that you and I have crossed paths. I don't know if it was through AAIE or if it was at the voltage control, but you seem really familiar to me.
It's because I work in education too. I work for National Association of Independent Schools, which is a membership association for private independent schools in the United States and different parts of the world. I'm part of the leadership team, so I run a couple conferences and stuff, so that's probably why.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, cool. So I'm working as a Scrum Master / Agile coach for a commercial company. So I've been using actually liberating structures for quite long. Probably got introduced to them maybe 4 years, something like that. Of course, especially during my PSM2, with Christine and Barry, I got to do a lot of liberating structure on the student better as well. Yeah, so I'm doing that, working at the site. I'm actually studying psychology at this moment as well, next to my job. And yeah, I find liberating structures, well, we're talking a little bit about it before you came in. So I always see liberating structures as a means to an end. So we want to achieve something. Something we hadn't yet talked about, but I do believe that is the strength of liberating structures is to help groups that are not truly used to have a kind of balanced conversation with each other, to have that balanced conversation. So usually when you see, especially in software development where I work, you see sometimes very asymmetrical discussions where one or two people are talking and the rest are sitting back and well, doing whatever. I have no clue actually what they're doing. Where liberating structures is a means to really balance that more and give people that would normally not speak up space to do speak up. So that's also kind of it's a means to an end, but it has the benefits at the side for me as well, and that I think that's also very powerful.
Thank you, Robert. And Jeremy, tell me about your connection to
everything. So I made a big pivot in my career in 2015 or 16 into coaching, and especially into agile coaching around 2018. So 4 or 5 years ago now. And I got a lot of theoretical explanation and a lot of sort of site visits, showing me, so to speak, what to do. And I had this huge question, which is like, all right, well, I know all this stuff. How in God's name do I actually apply it in relationship to people in these settings that are asking for it or being asked for it in some way? And I landed on liberating structures pretty quickly as like, this is a great way to enable people to self-organize around conversations that need to happen. And really just got addicted in particular to the vibe that just the way it feels, right? To have this like very accelerated flow and exchange of ideas and information and energy as well. And this year, I've been hosting the Think Slow Dojo, which is a bit of a reflective liminal space with Robert, actually, for the last year. And as I really lean into my desire to be with more people in this very generative and creative way, more of the time, I'm sort of focusing on the goal of increasing my and as many people's fluency with liberating structures as possible, and also growing the user base upon which to increase that fluency. And so this idea the idea for this call sort of came out of that desire to like, all right, how do we skill everybody up and give ourselves also a way that scales that skilling up in our local context, because I noticed there's a very strong correlation. If there's people where I'm at that are supportive, then we use it more. You know, and obviously if I can bring it in such a way that, you know, that works better, then there's a higher probability of sort of winning that support. So how can we support each other in being very well prepared to bring it where we're at, and then win the support so that we can continue to grow and accelerate? And there's a whole manifesto about how I think that type of shared thinking that structures make possible might be able to save, you know, ourselves, if not the planet. But yeah, that's me, I guess. Yeah.
I'm inspired. I think one of the things that I always love about liberating structures, as well as art of hosting, but lots of participatory leadership work, is how international it is. In my work, I work, as I said, for an education association, but I specialize in helping schools and organizations in the area of diversity and equity and inclusion. And while that work is international, it in the United States, it's really US centric. And because of this country's history, so I really, one of the things that I love about being in art of hosting and being with liberating structure folks is that I always get a much broader perspective, and I can see the application of some of the structures in different settings, which is, it's interesting because people are alike and different everywhere, right? So it's kind of cool. Why did you choose Wise Crowds for the topic for today?
Well, Wise Crowds is, I see it as actually not so much the topic, but actually the structure that I want to make use of. Just because, like most structures, it's scale invariant. So with just the four of us, we've got enough folks to run a Wise Crowds on whatever help request is revealed between us. And, you know, if this turns out to be a super awesome practical space that we can attract a lot of people into, you know, if we can get 100 people to show up, we can also run Wise Crowds in the same type of well, in a little bit different of a manner, but in generally the same type of manner to bear on an explicit help request. So that's really the goal, is to use both Wise Crowds and design storyboards to plan meetings, workshops, sessions, or to tackle some form of challenge or situation that we're in, and go from there. So in the chat, I linked to a Google Doc, just so that we can sort of have a shared reference for anything that sort of pops up. I of course always have a help request. So I'm always planning lots of stuff, but I really want to make sure that the space is available for you guys if you have anything that is sort of in your world that you'd like to help planning with. So does anybody else have a case that we might be able to work on for the remainder of the call?
Not right now from me. I'm in holiday mode anyway, so But maybe a bit later, beginning next year, I probably will have something, but not for me right now.
I have a couple of things that I could do that are work related, but I'm curious about how Wise Crowds works for more personal questions and inquiries. Jeremy, maybe we'd save a couple of minutes just to even talk about that. I'll talk about what I'm thinking about and my wondering, and then
cool. Yeah. And David, do you join the motion of holiday mode, or have you got some work you can bring in for us?
I've got a couple of things coming up, but I'm not. I need to work with other people, and I've ceded the design of the first 2 sessions of the second term to those people, and said I'm just going to do the technical assist, like make the technology work. So I don't want to. Maybe I don't want to go into that design at this point. But
Okay.
like I was saying, I think of this as a gym. So I'm glad if you guys have something that can help me work out a little bit, and then I'm sure I will be coming back with a design challenge shortly.
Sweet. Well, I definitely have a case that I've been working on that I'd love to get some thoughts about. So considering I have this sort of big, hairy, audacious desire to bring more people into the space of being able to work very generatively with liberating structures, I've been thinking about, how can I help the community grow the practice, and again, increase our fluency, and running into this situation where how do I do that while exemplifying what the structures enable us to do? So basically, how do I not do more than my fair share of thinking about that topic, but actually engage with a lot of other people around what has been done in the past, what is going on, and where we might find opportunities to collaborate and support one another. And so thinking about that goal, I've landed at, I talked with Keith about it for a couple weeks ago, and he sent me this slide deck. And in the slide deck is it's an output from an Ecocycle that one of the communities of practice did a couple years back. And in this slide deck, there was a reference to a Panarchy around the liberating structures community itself, which I think I noticed instantly gets me real excited, because Panarchy is one of the structures I've never used, and I've never hosted it, to be more precise. And there is an interesting sort of attractor coming up, which is Unbridled in a couple weeks here. The Liberating Structure sort of festival that's being hosted. And I have somebody's knocking on the door in the waiting room, but I no longer see them there. So we'll say that's a bounce. So the sort of intention is Unbridled is going to have some sort of open space elements, but obviously those elements I don't think will be long enough to do the totality of Panarchy. And considering also that we are a global community, I think that having some form of asynchronous option to collect more input from people from all over the globe would be super rad. So basically the goal is I'd like to orient everybody's attention towards some form of towards the structure Panarchy, which is basically a series of ecocycles at different scales, from the individual up to the societal, sort of in these nested hold-ons. And around, what do we do? What sort of is going on? What's the current inventory of actions and activities that everybody's doing all over the place at every scale for the liberating structure scene, and where might we find some attractors to lean in and perhaps collaborate towards some good stuff in the future. Maybe what's the ideas that are sort of out there stuck in these poverty traps that we might be able to put some sweat equity into. So that's kind of the context that I'm operating in. The goal again is to find spaces for us to collaborate together to grow the liberating structures practitioner base and increase our fluency. And as far as the participants are basically everybody in the liberating structures community, right? David Heath posted something in the user group organizers channel on the Slack around the sort of different folks, different levels or layers of engagement within the community. And I think that this exercise of Panarchy is really focused very much in the stewardship space and active co-collaborator space. So folks that really are actively engaged or want to be more actively engaged in stewarding the liberating structure scene into the world to a greater extent. So let me check. So my laundry list for this case is context, the goal, the participants, and then the big question is like, how, given this desire, given this time pressure, and this desire to run some form of asynchronous, what might we do to make that sort of happen? So clarifying questions.
So Jeremy, can you speak to the context just a little bit more? I mean, I'm not sure I'm exactly sure what you said about the context.
Yeah, so the context in this instance is both the subject matter and the participants, right? So we're doing a very meta move, right? That we are applying the liberating structure of Panarchy to ourselves as a global community of liberating structures practitioners, right? So, and I hope that it will be more enlightening than navel-gazy, right? But you know, even if it is, we'll learn something there.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy, I'm thinking, so I understand the context. You mentioned that we'll learn something. Still no, in what kind of, how should I phrase that? Well, yeah. No, let me ask the question here. So you talked about goal, and I'm not quite sure yet what you really want to achieve there. I mean, it's didn't really connect to me yet. Can you explain that a little better? What you, given the context, want to achieve here with that?
Yeah. So there are many sort of nested in one another. So there is the personal goal is to have more people that I can vibe with. And the means towards that goal is increasing the amount of users and the fluency of overall liberating structures users. And the structure in this instance is a means toward those ends by engaging with effectively the largest amount of people about this topic of how do we get more people inside the liberating structures bubble, right? I notice I've been doing a lot of thinking about that, and obviously I have ideas that I want to put into a space that I can see where they exist in sort of relationship to other ideas. so that it can so that we're doing this thing very much in a community based. It's not that I, Jeremy, am super smart and have all solutions, and I just need people to sort of go out here and help me do this shit. But I really want to find out who is thinking about this and cares about it the same way that I do, so that I can find people that I can jam with, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, ultimate goal is try and find my others and see who really wants to take an outsized amount of responsibility for the liberating structure scene and steward it into a larger way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I get that. Right. Yeah.
And Jeremy, I have one other question, and maybe this is to Robert too. I heard you both mention people's names that I'm not familiar with. And so my question is this initiative connected at all to the developers, like of Liberating Structures? I think of them somewhere in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, but yeah, so that's my question.
Yeah. So I've had conversations with Keith McCandles. I have never talked to Henry so far, but the summary of my conversation with Keith is like, yes, we are very interested in this. Yes, we think it's awesome that you want to put work into it. Go for it. So that's kind of the summary there. So, and I've taken that sort of that reception and goodwill and just trying to figure out, all right, so how do I draw more people into this thing with me? And I think Unbridled is a good time and space because there's already somewhat meaningful amount of attention. There's a sort of focal point within the community. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
So anything else? Otherwise, I will fuck off and let you guys do your magic.
I'm good.
Yep. Okay. Different thoughts here.
Well, I love the idea. I really do. I think for somebody like me who's been around liberating structures and other contexts for a really long time, it would be nice to have, as Jeremy said, some others that I could go to help me apply some of the practices in the various settings that I work. Mm-hmm. It would also be helpful to practice and to have, some, be in the warm seat and do some practicing with others who've used the structures more. So mm-hmm. I think it's important. I also think that with a level of disconnection and just disaffection that we're experiencing in the United States, it's a great opportunity to bring some structures in that could help people connect and collaborate. So I like that too.
Yeah, I can fully understand that. Yeah, it's. I think indeed I agree with you there. The idea is indeed to have more people and lead to more teachers, basically, or coaches, however you want to call them. I don't mind any of them. That can help people. I do think, and that's also my experience with liberating structures, that experience experiencing them actually and having experience is really valuable in successfully hosting them. I mean, you can try to read it from the website and the book or the app, but still it doesn't really replace experiencing it and seeing somebody host it for the first time. And that's you gain such a level of experience from that. So yeah, I can fully understand. The more people that can do that, the more people that can successfully share that knowledge and show people, that would be really valuable. Yeah. So that brings me then to who are these people to do that? So, and that's pretty interesting because there is I think there is a wide community of people that do this. It's indeed not a very connected community, I think. It's all small pockets of people here and there that maybe on occasion bump into each other, but not indeed in a very structural way. At least that's kind of my experience with it. I don't know how you see that.
Yeah, I agree, Robert, and I think that I face is, and I imagine this might be the case for others, it's like there's so much, how do I, and how in this initiative does this structure support use in a more formal way? Like, so if you're thinking about hosting an event, and you've got a variety of different modalities that you can use, is there a kind of a checklist that's built in that says, I'm thinking about X, or even just the names of various, open space, liberating, like, so that you even had a checklist to say, have I used this and where might I need some help, and how could it support the program or the convening that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I just find that there's just so many, and I'm a kind of a lifelong learner. So the more I learn, the more I just have too much, right? So there's also something about how to structure so that you can really use things.
Yep. Yeah. So I agree with you there. Something I mentioned up front. For me, at least, a liberating structure is never detached from a certain purpose. So if you can bring that connection, so you have a certain challenge within your work, within your private life, within a community you're in, and you want to try something, that there is some guidance here for you. Okay, so you have this challenge, so you could look at these types of structures. And maybe here is a community that can help you with that. So I kind of see that flow going that way. And I actually think these communities are there. That's the funny part of it. Because I know that there are all sorts of liberating structure user groups, and they're usually pretty limited or localized. But they are there, and maybe that needs a common language. It could be, maybe that would help as well, or maybe more common language across different countries and cultures to help out. But yeah, all in all, I think the real trick is going to find these people. There it is. Once you have them, I think this should be pretty easy, to be really honest. That's kind of where I'm with this. Yeah. So finding people. So that's where we gotta be. And that is, I need these kind of events. I don't know this particular event. Just I did see it, but I never truly read what it was. It could be maybe indeed participate in these kind of events more, where quite a lot of potential stewards are there. And see if you can get them.
I'm loving the idea of inclusive community participation and sucking people in at all levels.
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea of Panarchy in an asynchronous mode as a framework for advancing multiple layers from personal to community to skill building to values to outcomes to language and to pathways, the construction and of things that you can navigate. So bodies of artifacts, recordings, examples, commentary, interviews, all of the things that we do as part of our practice, but then building a library of retrospective techniques, taking from other areas that can benefit liberating structures as much as liberating structures can benefit other areas. And, you know, building that framework and maybe launching that as in a community like Unbridled, where there will be probably 80% people that know something about liberating structures and 20% people that are new, trying to use that energy to say, what are the nested levels of Panarchy? Like, we're going to have 6 or 8 or 64 ecocycles going at the same time. And gradually we're going to winnow those down to 6, you know, projects that are ongoing. And those projects will be unified because we've undertaken the initiative in this way. We're actually building something. Maybe we need to bring some strategy KnotWorking techniques into the construction of the framework that I'm thinking of, or I guess the Panarchy map. I try to do something in Miro while we're talking, and it's just a map. It's just, you know, well, maybe this is the kind of like multiple levels. But if we were able to establish a purpose and agree on some outcomes before Unbridled or at Unbridled, then I think there's strength in the Panarchy approach of being asynchronous, and each of us could work on our own 6 ecocycle system and then bring those together engagements like this one, where our goal is to resolve the thing that needs to be resolved next. We don't have we're not operating on a schedule. We're operating on an optimum development path that we are going to figure out together and create together. And we're going to challenge each other, and we're going to coach each other. And those values of creator, challenger, and coach, those are things that we can bring anyone who comes to the project, whether they're new or old, can absorb those 3 things in working with the framework of Panarchy. Once you get an ecocycle and you have a sense of why you're putting things where you're putting them and how you can absorb what other people might say about your explanation or what you might learn about their explanation, you're really on the path to authentic progress, you know, both in terms of defining it and making it happen. So I think we have a strong starting point, and then it's a matter of we could question there, but we need to do some more wicked questions. How do we make the bubble bigger whilst not popping the bubble? Because I don't think of being inside of a bubble. I think of liberating structures being in the world. I don't want it to be insulated from the world, especially. I want it to be a go-to tactic, like, you know, as common as how's the weather, which in England is pretty common.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this one.
Yeah, David, that's really helpful. And it's actually interesting. It's tied to one of the questions that I have, which is, you know, Jeremy talked about building, and you talked about the majority of people being at the upcoming event. I forgot the name of it right now. Most of them knowing something about liberating structures, and some being new. And I'm wondering about how do you create a sort of developmental pathway for the upskilling that Jeremy was talking about. And then I noticed that there's that natural flow in those ecosystem maps, right, to maturity. So using the design, but doing it intentionally and purposefully so that you can pull in some of those new people and have a structure for them to grow, as well as those who think they know it all. There's always.
Well, the great thing about people that know something about liberating structures is that we value the naive perspective. And that's one reason that it works, is that we are trying to find out what the people who have never seen it or spoken about it before, we're trying to empower them and enable them to come forth with wisdom.
That's true.
And if we do that well, we will all be joyful. That is the critical thing. It's not about winning an argument. It's about finding a thought we didn't have yet together.
Yeah, I agree with you that as well. I'm also thinking, and more as a practical matter to get started is to get people thinking of, okay, what is the smallest, maybe most valuable thing we can do at this moment to get this on our way. Because we can think of a lot, and we can think of all sorts of libraries and stuff, and it's awesome, and it probably will be, but okay, that also can create an inertia, right, if you make it too big. So it's good to think big, but then also bring it back to something that is practical, is something we can try and see and learn from that. So in other words, take an agile approach to it. Yeah, just something I would highly recommend anyway. But big ideas are fine, but to do stuff you need to have something smaller, more practical, I would say, and eventually steer people in that direction too. Otherwise, go ahead.
No, sorry. There was a lag, and so I didn't hear the last part of your.
Oh yeah, so think of it in an agile way. So it's okay to think big, especially in Panarchy, you can get quite big, but bring it back to something smaller and practical that you can try. I think there is the kind of convergence that you eventually would need to encourage.
So toward that end, what's something small that you could do? I don't know how the marketing and advertising is going for the larger event that's coming up, but there's always something more fruitful when we make a personal invitation to someone that we think could really benefit from the experience in some way. So it's usually talked about in terms of each one reach one. I'm thinking each one reach three, right? And just kind of multiply that a little bit, but making, 3 active invitations and requests to people that we know, our coaches, our hosts, our facilitators, our process people and artists, right? And invite them to the experience. Leaders of any kind who might be having a challenge, right? Or an opportunity. So I think that kind of, invitation is really important in any of our gatherings. And so being really intentional and purposeful about making an invitation.
Yep.
I love the idea of inviting and each one reaching 3. And I think you can combine that with the minimum viable product, and it could be pre-work for for unbridled,
Oh,
or it could be post work.
oh, yeah.
Let's pick one of the layers. Let's say do your personal development ecocycle for 2022, and exchange that with 3 people that you don't know, and see if you can get that to work as a way of bringing people together with something that they've already seen. Or
Oh, wow.
your 3 is kind of like the impromptu networking. It's like, I've talked about my personal development ecocycle for 1 minute with 3 different people that I don't know. And then now I'm ready to do the same thing about liberating structures as a whole, or about a couple of different skill levels, like particular structures. It then can evolve in a lot of different ways, but by grounding it in a common thing, you've got something going. And the idea of minimum viable product is always like, that's the outcome. That goes along with the agenda shift idea, which is, we don't know how we're going to do it, but this is what we want as an output. And then we can think about measuring it after that.
Yeah, that sounds like a great, it's a great idea. So,
Oh, I want to hear more about that, David. So, yeah, I love that idea.
yeah, because it starts from yourself.
Yeah.
Which is always the one thing you have.
Yeah.
You can make it bigger, but that also indeed makes it harder to keep it in context. Starting from yourself and then taking it bigger together could be quite helpful. Yeah, I like it. It's a great idea. Now,
and you could also, you could do it as the skills inventory of your 10 favorite structures. You could put your skill level with liberating structures, your comfort or your joy. You could also ecocycle that. That would be another starting point. You could workshop what you wanted to use as a starting point. But if we did something similar to what we do in the KnotWorking group, which is decide on the next thing we're going to focus on, what is it that we'll do next time? What do we do now? That's just the wonderful thing about Panarchy, is that it has the ability to diversely approach different subjects on an asynchronous basis. And 1 week we could be doing one level, and the next week a different level.
Yep.
As long as we know that the layers are related and we're advancing toward the outcome that we've identified, which is a kind of synthesis on how to grow the practice while maintaining the value of tight community and the joy of discovery and the upping of skills and the building of networks in a sustainable way.
Yep.
And probably a bunch of other stuff I forgot, or that you're about to tell me.
That's awesome. And so are you imagining, David, to do, to share your ecocycle with just any random 3 people, or 3 people within, not random, but like just 3 people that might be in your sphere of influence, or 3 people that have some connection to liberating structures?
Well, you could start with just the people that are in attendance, so that one of the things you would say to the group beforehand, come with this. Give this a try. If you'd like to have a practice before, we could do a warm up like this type of event, where we just invite people to come do your personal ecocycle, or we could launch that at Unbridled, and it would be the beginning of something. You could do it a lot of different ways, but you're going to have that many people there, then the normal thing with impromptu networking is to do 3 rounds of it, and then you've met the 3 people. It's just the idea of coming. We often do spiral journal before that, so that's another way of getting to a similar, here's where I am, here's what I'm afraid of, here's what I'm anticipating, giving it some focus. But I like the idea of, because you brought up the personal use of liberating structures, and I often think of that too, as I'm doing ecocycle on the things that I want to happen. And I'm realizing what things are necessary that need to be in this ecocycle and where are they right now on the. And then for me, that's been really helpful at both seeing the structures and also communicating with people. And then no one can object when you're doing it on your own. Sometimes at work, it can be a little more contentious.
Right. Great. Okay. That's what I was trying to see if it was connected to what I was envisioning or if it was separate and different, and it's both. So perfect.
I have anticipation that it would be really empowering for people to see the commonality of both intention and challenge in doing a personal ecocycle. And as long as it's focused on, it could be, here's one ecocycle on challenges, and here's one on creations, and here's one on coaching. It doesn't have to, you can make the layers however you want to make them, whatever seems provocative and useful. So.
Yep. Yeah.
Righteous.
I like the idea. Hey, he's back.
Yeah, I'm interrupting the party. This has been really great to sit here and listen to you guys. So there's a lot of food for thought. I'm exceedingly grateful that I recorded this call because there's like literally you guys are going at a pace in which I can't sort of keep track, right? So what I really like is this. The thing that seems the most concrete for me is this combination of at the individual level, and I like this this sort of looping back with impromptu networking. It feels super clean and also very very lightweight in that, hey, you're gonna have some points of contact with a fistful of people around this stuff, and on the basis of that, sort of whatever happens, but it feels like a good space for cross-pollination. And there's I also can see like this opening up of like a terrifyingly large possibility space when I think about like how do I sort of nest, or how do I offer these ecocycles in the structure of Panarchy, right? There's, it's funny, right? Thinking about it from like a very linear growth individual to societal context, but I also like this import of, but I mean, at each one of these levels, there's an infinite number of different ways to sort of look at, where we want to sort of stick attention to, that makes it really interesting. I also like this idea of, of something that is sort of more explicitly recurring and ongoing, to think of this as like the opening salvo towards a series also sort of creates a sense of excitement for me, I notice. So there's a lot of good stuff. Thank you.
Man, thank you for organizing this and thinking about what it should be and how we should do it. It's bold.
Well, no, yep. It's been a long time since I've been accused of being shy. So thank you guys a lot. So I think next Monday is going to be the Think Slow Dojo, but I'll be hosting another Wise Crowds design call the Monday after that. So I think that's going to be the 10th. Yeah, I think that'll be the 10th. So same bat time, same bat channel. And I noticed there's this question that you brought in, Caroline, as well about how to use Wise Crowds for the personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did bring that in, and it's been an ongoing inquiry for me throughout the pandemic, as I'm one of the people who is, I was always an introvert anyway, so So the pandemic has really been just like super, like not a problem for me because I don't draw energy from large crowds, even though I work in them all the time. And yeah, so it's just like how it's just about getting back out into the world, right? And so some people never left the world, and other people like me have only just kind of go into the world when I absolutely have to, and the rest of the time I don't. But my organization, for example, excuse me, I mentioned that I direct 2 conferences. We had almost 8,000 people online at my conference in December. And we're going to go back on site next year. And so when we were last together on site, it was Seattle in 2019, and we were about 7,500, 7,600 people. And so I'm thinking a lot about getting back into the world, having to, visit the city where my conference is going to take place and do site visits and engage with people. And then what's it going to be like to have, thousands of people in a space and be with them, and to do that in a way that creates connection and comfort for me as an organizer, but certainly for all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a challenge. I do think we need to learn some things again after 2 years of basically being locked up at your home. So that's definitely to really get people face to face back together again. It's such a large crowd. That's quite challenging. I must admit to you.
Now, there's also I also have this sense of opportunity as you describe this challenge of having sort of forcibly unlearned a bunch of stuff that may not have been helpful, that there's a particularly ripe opportunity space of saying, hey, because this is going to be sort of relearning and weird, we have come up with a game plan to try and optimize or to design the space to make it a little bit more, to get us in there in a little bit more of a way. It feels like that opportunity of people buying into that feels really strong, and actually I would be relieved, right, to know that you've thought about this from beforehand, and there's something that I can just slip into. Whereas 5 years ago, what do you mean you want us all to do this? I've been to tons of these things. Why should we try it this way?
Wow, Jeremy, I love that. Both of your ideas, Robert and Jeremy. We planned this conference to pieces, and we've thought about, and I've thought about all the kind of surfacey things like people are doing, like put a sticker on, depending on how close you want people to be, or put it on your lanyard or something. But this is a conference that has always, we'll be in our 35th year next year. And it has always been a place where people just love on each other, as they say here in the States. It's like you walk in like you're hugging all your friends, it's as touchy-feely a conference setting as you could imagine by its very nature. And it's called the NAIS People of Color Conference, and it was created for educators of color who've always been a vast minority in our schools. That's changed for sure, but that was the genesis of the conference. And to be able to come and be in a place that's safe and that's sanctuary, that's literally called a sanctuary. About 75% of the people are people of color, about 25% of the people are white participants. It's like that movie Waiting to Exhale, it's, you know, that's what people just, the way they describe it, it's just like coming home, being safe, not having to answer any questions about who you are, your identity, and all those kinds of things. So much so that there is a Facebook group that's called POCC Withdrawal. So like there's a Facebook group that people start posting into before the conference ends about what it's going to be like to go back into school community where you're not in the majority anymore. So it's
yeah. What I'm thinking about, and I think from what you're talking about, it might not be the very hardest thing to do, but indeed, especially on a first time back like this again, indeed focus on safety. So either indeed very practical safety, like you say, okay, do we want people to have maintain distance or whatever? I think that's a great thing, and it really encourages people to reflect on what others will or want. But I do believe that by showing that, people take that with them, that kind of feeling and that kind of see what you're doing there, and that could help them again in their normal jobs. From okay, if I need to make it a safe space, I need to think of these things to do or not to do. Actually, would also be so. I don't think it's a very challenging subject, but it might be good to indeed think of that and need very consciously lead people into that in a way. And again, it's they experience it as the same thing, but they actually learn from that as well. And that I think that's can be very useful and helpful for people.
I agree. Well, if you know, at some point, you all want to do a wise crowds with me on this one.
Sure.
I'd absolutely love it because it would be. I mean, you can substitute anybody where the purpose of the event is not just. I mean, and it's professional development. I mean, we have world-class speakers and world-class workshops and all of those kinds of things happening at the same time, right? So it's not, you know, I mean, it's people spend money to come to have, you know, that kind of experience as well. But that elemental thing that brings people there, that this, you know, where people talk about, that's what I'm trying to make sure isn't lost as a result of all the things that we're going through.
I think it's an interesting moment in history because, you know, we can read in the paper every day, schools have to remain open, things have to go back to normal, things have to be normal. And, you know, we should also recognize we're not going back to normal. It's not going to happen. And we should go ahead and mourn the things that we miss and create new things. And because the things that we miss are pointing to the values and the things that we really need. The sustenance, the nurturance, all the things that we really need. We owe it to ourselves and the future to reinvent how those things happen. And I think, you know, liberating structures, the trust that you're starting with in your community, that's something that it gives you the space to try something new. And that something new is something that is possible. It's not normal that isn't possible. It's not halfway back to normal and aren't we lucky we can get halfway. It's our values reinterpreted. It's our practices reinvented. Those are positive, joyful opportunities that we have in front of us. And instead of judging and saying, you know, distance learning is a failure and nothing on the internet can ever be as good as face-to-face, we need to look beyond that idea. Like we're building a failure scenario for ourselves by trying to go back to normal.
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
Love that. Love that.
And it's good to acknowledge that, right? It's good to acknowledge that with people, that because I think there are still quite a lot of people that do think actually that it's all going back to normal at some point, where I think the reality indeed is that it's not. And on so many different levels, actually, it's not going back to normal. But people, yeah, they either have a hard time connecting that, or maybe a little bit more blind to it. But yeah, actually, actively acknowledging that could be leading to some interesting conversations.
Oh yeah.
Build forward better, not build back. Let's build forward.
Let's build better. Let's indeed see this whole mess as an opportunity that stopped by to change some things. And sure, it brought harm. Let's also not forget this. It did incredible harm to people, both physically and mentally. But yeah, maybe let's try to put that behind us and see what kind of new path we can go into.
Yeah, and as you describe this, there's two things that sort of pop into mind. So this reference that David, you brought up to mourning, right? So the structure GriefWalking obviously sort of looms large in my head. That's a very interesting structure that helps organize support for this sense of mourning and grief in order to make the transition through. And yesterday I watched the Muppets Christmas Carol with my wife and kids, and as the ghost of Christmas Future comes by, she goes, oh man, it's just a bit. He already had resolved the change, and now we just hit him over the head with all this bad news after bad news. And I think it's the utility of that is that there's no transformation that's possible in the absence of like direct confrontation with that sense of death, right? It takes that like, oh my goodness, this is where this thing goes. If nothing changes, that is able to energize me for the legitimate work that is trying and doing this new and different way, like to go through the awkwardness of it. There's a swift kick in the ass or a banana peel into the grave for me if I don't get it sort of squared away, that helps remind me and power me through all of the squishiness.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I GriefWalking? For some reason or other, that's new to me.
Yeah, it's a liberating structure in development.
Yeah, it's in development.
Oh.
So I'll also put a link in you've got
really powerful. You have to be a little bit careful with it because you're really asking people to engage in the idea of what it means to let go and be willing to move forward or move at all. But if you can get in a situation where someone's revealing serious life pain, so it's one to be cautious about. I know I've seen Keith run it a couple of times, and once it became about someone's terminal diagnosis, which was about as heavy as anything you could imagine, and it came out light and good, but you could feel the sense of the crowd has to be capable of handling that, and they were, which we always say the room never lets us down, but I worry about it if it's something like life and death like that. But the idea of grief, just the idea that you're recognizing that yes, it hurts, yes, this is complicated, yes, you need other people to walk with you and talk it through with you, and yes, you will come out the other side and you will remember the good things and you will reconstruct those. Keeping that as a way through the pain and the confusion and the sadness, but honoring that pain, it's important, as opposed to submerging it. And when we think about normal, the things we aren't going to mourn, it wasn't fair, it wasn't sustainable, it wasn't diverse, it wasn't inclusive. And
right.
We also can take heart from the opportunities that are in front of us now. We need to do it quickly because the power structures are already reorganizing to make it even more like it was than it was.
That's right. It's so right. Oh my gosh. That is, yeah.
So Caroline, there's a link in the chat to a doc that has an explanation of the structure and development GriefWalking. It's for sure, give that one a gander.
I will.
That might apply to your context.
So much. Oh, I can see that happening. I can see that happening so easily. We're going to be in San Antonio too, which is actually a very beautiful city. And I could very well imagine that happening along I forgot what it's, the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas. Yeah. That would be really amazing.
Righteous.
Thank you.
That we're over our time boundary, so thanks everybody for hanging out. I guess we were doing something that felt cool, that we were glad to be in.
Could we share email addresses, or are they someplace that I'm unaware of?
I can do that.
You're on. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn too.
Yeah, I just never use it. Okay, I am there too, but here's mine.
There's my email.
And Caroline, are you also in the Liberating Structure Slack channel?
Yes, I am.
Panarchy channel, Jeremy.
Yeah. Well, that could work as well. All right. Yeah. This naming things are really easy. Awesome.
All right.
Well, I got to put dinner together for these kids. Thanks very much for your time and attention and hanging out. And I hope to see you next time.
Thank you so much. Be well.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too.
Indeed.
Happy New Year indeed. Yeah.